"She's violating community appearance standards again," Patricia Lentz announced, loud enough for half of Lakewood Meadows to hear. Her voice cut through the morning air like glass. "That hair makes the wellness fair look like a carnival sideshow. Either she lets me fix it, or she's fined for non-compliance." Clara froze, her hands hovering over the folding table where she'd been arranging flowers for the neighborhood's Spring Harmony Fair. Patricia, chairwoman of the HOA, self-declared guardian of visual unity, already had a cordless clipper in her hand. I saw her eyes glint behind her sunglasses, the smugness of someone used to getting her way. "Touch her again," I said, my tone low but steady, "and I'll make sure that hand never holds another position of authority." The clipper buzzed once before Patricia stopped. She laughed under her breath, the kind of brittle laugh that hides fear. "You can't threaten the board, Dr. Vale. You signed the community bylaws." "Maybe," I replied, "but I also know which of those bylaws you forged." That got her attention. For the first time, her smirk faltered. I could see the tiniest flicker in her posture, a calculation. Not fear yet, but curiosity about what I knew. If you think HOA presidents can't ruin a life until someone stops them, stay here, because what she did next turned my wife's recovery into a spectacle, and by the end of this story, I'll show you how I made her pay with everything she had. So hit subscribe now. You'll want to see what justice looks like when it finally lands. My name's Ethan Vale. I'm a forensic psychologist. I don't raise my voice often, but I study people who destroy others under the guise of rules. Patricia Lentz fits that profile perfectly. Control disguised as concern, and she'd chosen the wrong family to test it on. Clara's head was bare in uneven patches, her scalp showing the pale memory of chemotherapy. She'd beaten lymphoma just 8 months ago. Every millimeter of that new hair meant something: growth, survival, defiance. To me, it was hope. To Patricia, it was a violation. The rule book she waved around didn't exist 6 months ago. Community wellness standards, she called it, a section she'd slipped into the HOA charter without member approval. It allowed her to recommend corrective appearance measures for residents who disrupted neighborhood harmony. In other words, it let her play God. The first notice came last week, a printed warning about unkempt visual presence. I thought it was a sick joke until she showed up this morning with that buzzing machine, acting like she had legal authority to use it. She even called it discipline. People gathered near the gazebo, neighbors pretending to admire the decorations, but too fascinated to intervene. That's what power does in communities like ours. It turns decent people into silent spectators. Patricia loved that silence. She thrived on it. "Mrs. Lenz," Clara said softly, voice shaking, "I already told you, I'm recovering." "That's no excuse," Patricia snapped. "This is a family community. Presentation matters. We can't have outsiders pitying us." Something in me broke at those words. Not rage, something colder, cleaner, the kind of silence you hear before a verdict. I stepped between them, close enough that I could smell the lavender lotion on Patricia's hands, the one she used at every board meeting. "You're trespassing on private property," I said. "And for the record, that bylaw you're quoting wasn't legally adopted. I've checked the timestamps." Her hand froze on the clipper's handle. She didn't know that I'd spent the past 3 nights comparing digital meeting minutes to the county's official filings. My training in forensic analysis wasn't built for HOA politics, but manipulation is manipulation, no matter the setting. Patricia recovered fast, smirking again. "You can call your fancy lawyer, doctor. It won't change how this neighborhood works." She turned and strutted back toward her table of decorum volunteers, flipping her clipboard like a victory flag. Clara sat down on the bench beneath the gazebo archway. I crouched beside her, touching the uneven stubble at the back of her head. She tried to smile, but couldn't. "It's not the hair," she whispered. "It's how she looked at me, like I'm unfinished." That broke me more than anything Patricia could have said. I'd spent my career deconstructing abuse from the outside. I never thought I'd watch it happen in my own yard, wrapped in HOA stationery. As the fair music started again and the crowd scattered, I looked at Patricia one last time. She stood on the steps, lecturing 2 residents about color coordination. Every gesture was measured, rehearsed. She believed she was untouchable. But standing there with Clara trembling beside me, I realized something Patricia didn't. She'd chosen a battlefield I understood better than anyone. Coercion, dominance, compliance. They're patterns I've spent years dissecting for court testimony. And now I'd make her the case study. She humiliated my wife for her own control. I was going to strip her control piece by piece. And when I was done, the whole community would see her for what she really was. The next morning, the HOA newsletter hit every doorstep in Lakewood Meadows. Patricia's name was printed across the top in bold italics. Community Harmony Update. I stood on my porch, coffee cooling in my hand, reading the first line. We must all do our part to maintain the dignity of our neighborhood, even when personal vanity or illness challenge our sense of order. She didn't name Clara, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. The tone was her signature blend of moral poison, half etiquette, half judgment. Down the block, two neighbors waved, awkwardly, before turning away. Silence again. Always silence. I folded the paper in half and stared across the street at Patricia's colonial-style house. Every window was symmetrically curtained, every shrub trimmed to identical height. Order was her religion. And that morning, she'd declared my wife a heretic. Clara stayed inside, avoiding sunlight and small talk. I heard the television running quietly in the background. Old cooking shows, her comfort noise. She didn't want to step outside. The humiliation from yesterday had settled like a bruise neither of us could touch. I walked to my car and drove toward the clubhouse. I needed to see the system that let Patricia get away with it. I wasn't planning a confrontation, just a diagnosis. People like her always left patterns, and patterns could be proven. Inside the HOA office, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and ego. The walls were lined with community excellence plaques, mostly self-awarded. Behind the reception desk, a young woman in a beige cardigan looked up. Dr. Vale, do you have an appointment? I don't, I said. But I'd like to review the bylaws and the last 3 meeting minutes. Public record, right? Her polite smile faltered. You'll need board authorization for internal copies. I leaned on the counter. Then I'll wait until the next open meeting. I assume those minutes will be read aloud? She nodded, uneasy. I could tell she wasn't used to anyone questioning the process. That told me everything I needed to know. Patricia ran this place like a private kingdom, not a community. Through the glass partition, I spotted Aaron Bell out back, pushing a maintenance cart toward the tennis courts. He saw me and hesitated, his hand tightening on the handle. I stepped outside. Rough day yesterday, I said. He looked over his shoulder before answering. She shouldn't have done that, but she's got pull here, Doc. Best to keep your head down. The irony of that sentence wasn't lost on me. You were there, I said quietly. You saw it happen. I see a lot, he muttered. And I try to keep my job. I didn't press. Fear makes people compliant, and Patricia knew how to weaponize it. But Aaron's tone carried guilt, and guilt has a way of turning into courage when the right moment comes. As I walked back toward the parking lot, I passed the bulletin board outside the clubhouse. A new notice was pinned to it. Mandatory wellness inspection. All properties subject to review. Saturday 9 a.m. That was Patricia's next move, a power demonstration. She wanted everyone to remember she could step onto any lawn, enter any yard, and judge anyone's worth with a clipboard. I took a picture of the notice. Evidence begins small, with patterns and timestamps. My training taught me that every manipulator leaves behavioral fingerprints, the same phrases, the same public humiliation cycles. And Patricia's cycle was tightening. At home, Clara sat by the window, staring at the gazebo where she'd been shamed. She's still running the fair next week, she said softly. Everyone's pretending nothing happened. That's what people do when they're afraid, I said. But fear isn't permanent. It cracks. Clara looked at me, her eyes red but steady. And what are you going to do? Watch her, I replied, like a surgeon studies a tumor before removal. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA's digital portal. Public minutes, archived newsletters, board memos. It was all there, formatted in neat PDF links. I didn't need secret files in a basement. The corruption was hiding in plain sight. I started reading the timestamps one by one. Every amendment Patricia had added was dated during private emergency sessions. No votes, no resident signatures, just her and 2 compliant board members rubber-stamping her decisions. The next morning, I printed her forged bylaws and highlighted the dates. Proof of fraud doesn't need drama. It needs precision. But my plan wasn't to bury her in paperwork. Not yet. Public exposure requires timing, not noise. When I stepped outside, the sun caught the brass sign near the entrance. Welcome to Lakewood Meadows, a community of harmony. Below it, I noticed a thin scratch through the word harmony. Someone had dragged a key across the metal. A quiet rebellion, maybe. Proof that Patricia's control was cracking from the edges. As I turned back toward the house, Aaron's truck rolled past. He gave me the smallest nod. That nod was enough. The silence in Lakewood Meadows had started to shift. Aaron's nod stayed in my mind long after his truck disappeared around the corner. It wasn't agreement, not yet, but it was a fracture in Patricia's wall of silence. And I knew from experience that once fear starts cracking, truth eventually leaks through. By Saturday morning, the mandatory wellness inspection was in full swing. I watched from my driveway as Patricia marched from house to house, clipboard tucked under one arm, a smile so rehearsed it looked carved. 2 board members trailed behind her, checking boxes, writing fines, pretending this was all procedure. The air smelled of fertilizer and cheap perfume, both meant to hide rot. When she reached our street, I saw Aaron again, following the group at a distance with a clipboard of his own. His uniform shirt was tucked too tight, his shoulders hunched forward, the posture of someone trying to disappear. Every time Patricia barked a new order, he flinched. Clara stayed inside. She couldn't watch. I told her I'd handle it, that she didn't have to face them again, but even I wasn't ready for what came next. Patricia stopped in front of our yard. "Dr. Vale," she called out, "I see your grass exceeds community height standards. Shall I add another violation?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked past her to Aaron, who was pretending to write but hadn't touched his pen to the page once. His eyes darted between us, between power and conscience. "Add whatever you want," I said finally. "But remember, every notice you post is traceable. I've archived each one." Patricia frowned. "That sounds like a threat." "No," I said. "It's accountability." Aaron's grip on the clipboard tightened. A small tremor passed through his hand, barely noticeable unless you'd spent years studying stress responses like I had. The corners of his mouth twitched, a suppressed instinct to speak that he immediately strangled with a swallow. Patricia turned to him. "Take a photo of this lawn for record-keeping." He hesitated. His thumb hovered over the phone's camera button, but he didn't move. She noticed. "Aaron?" she repeated, sharper. "Yes, ma'am," he said, forcing a nod. His jaw flexed once as he raised the phone, but when the shutter clicked, I realized the lens wasn't aimed at the grass. It was aimed slightly upward, catching Patricia's sneer instead. Intentional or not, it was the first honest image taken in this neighborhood all year. She moved on to the next house. Aaron lingered. When our eyes met, he gave a subtle shake of his head. Small, quick, almost involuntary. It said, "Not here. Not yet." After they left, I walked down to the sidewalk. The grass still felt cool from the morning dew. I crouched and pulled a single weed, a pointless gesture, but it gave my hands something to do while I replayed Aaron's hesitation. That's how guilt manifests, through muscles before words. That evening, I went to the community park to think. Children were playing near the swings, parents chatting by the benches. Normal life went on, as if the HOA's reach ended where laughter began. I knew better. Patricia's influence was like mold, quiet, spreading, feeding on apathy. I sat beneath the oak tree near the tennis courts, the one place Patricia's volunteers rarely pruned. That's when I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. Aaron stood there, half in shadow. His uniform was unbuttoned at the collar, sweat darkening the fabric under his arms. He looked like a man rehearsing the act of courage. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, eyes fixed on the ground. "I'm fine," I replied. "But you're not." His mouth opened, then closed. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, scraping his boot against the gravel. His shoulders rose, then fell, a sigh swallowed halfway through. I could almost hear the argument happening inside him. Job versus conscience, paycheck versus truth. "She's going too far," he muttered finally. "These inspections, they're not even approved. She just told us to do them, said it's about community image." "Did she document any votes?" I asked. He shook his head. She doesn't let anyone see the drafts, says it's board business. Last month, she fined a woman for leaving her trash can out overnight, then doubled it when she questioned the rule. He glanced toward the clubhouse, where the lights still glowed faintly across the lawn. His fingers tapped the clipboard hanging at his side in a slow, nervous rhythm. "I've got copies of her messages," he whispered. "But if she finds out I'm talking—" "She won't," I said. "And when the time comes, those messages might save more than your job." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint laughter of children fading into dusk. Aaron exhaled hard, finally meeting my eyes. There it was, the shift from fear to defiance, fragile but real. "If I send you something," he said, "promise you'll use it right." "I promise." He nodded once, clipped and quick, then turned away before anyone could see. His walk was stilted at first, shoulders drawn tight, but as he disappeared into the shadows, they eased, like a man unlearning submission one step at a time. That night, a single message appeared in my inbox, a forwarded email chain from Patricia's account, labeled Wellness Enforcement Initiative. It wasn't enough to expose her yet, but it was the first crack in the dam. The email sat on my screen like a fuse. Patricia's signature gleamed at the bottom of each message, looped, proud, unrepentant. Every line dripped with authority she didn't legally have, orders to fine residents, threats of decorum audits, reminders to protect our neighborhood's image at all costs. It wasn't policy. It was psychological warfare. I printed the chain, highlighting phrases that repeated: visual unity, non-compliance correction, disciplinary wellness. The wording wasn't just officious, it was rehearsed. She'd built a language to disguise abuse as duty. I'd seen similar tactics in case studies of institutional gaslighting. But now I had something better than theory. I had proof. Still, proof meant nothing without a platform. Patricia's power came from visibility. To dismantle her, I'd need the same. I just didn't know how public this battle would become yet. Sunday morning, the HOA board held a harmony breakfast at the clubhouse, her latest invention to remind everyone who owned the narrative. I decided to attend. The clubhouse was dressed like a church of order, white tablecloths, hydrangeas in crystal vases, name tags placed alphabetically. Patricia stood near the podium, flanked by two board members like ceremonial guards. Her laughter was bright and hollow, bouncing off the polished walls. As I entered, the chatter dimmed. People looked down at their plates, pretending not to see me. I could almost taste their discomfort, the bystander's guilt that keeps tyrants in charge. Patricia's smile didn't falter. "Dr. Vale," she said sweetly, "so glad you could join us. I trust the inspection went smoothly yesterday?" "It revealed a lot," I said. "Some of it surprising." Her brow tightened for just a heartbeat, then relaxed again. "We strive for transparency here. Do you?" I asked. "Because I found a thread labeled Wellness Enforcement Initiative with your signature. Funny, I don't recall that in the official charter." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Forks stopped clinking. A man near the window cleared his throat, trying to fill the air with anything but tension. Patricia leaned forward, voice honeyed. "I'd be careful throwing around accusations, Doctor. We wouldn't want anyone to misinterpret your personal frustrations." She meant Clara. She wanted to use my wife's pain as a shield. That was her reflex: dehumanize, then deflect. I didn't take the bait. "You're right," I said calmly. "Interpretation matters, especially when county investigators start reviewing timestamps." The faintest ripple went through the room. A woman in the back set down her coffee cup too hard, the sound cracking the tension wide open. Patricia's mask flickered, only for a second, but I caught it. Fear. Aaron was stationed by the hallway, pretending to adjust a projector. He didn't look up, but I saw the corner of his mouth tighten. He was listening. He'd done his part by sending that email. Now he was waiting to see if I'd burn it or build something from it. Patricia recovered quickly, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's remember why we're here, to celebrate unity." Her voice brightened again, manicured for control. "Our HOA has always valued order, and order begins with cooperation." She gestured toward a slideshow of manicured lawns and smiling families projected on the screen. But the projector flickered once, then twice. The image froze, right on her email signature. Erin had accidentally connected the wrong file. For 3 silent seconds, the words Wellness Enforcement Initiative glowed across the wall. Patricia lunged for the remote. "Technical glitch," she snapped. "Please, enjoy the pastries." I hid my satisfaction behind a sip of coffee. That flash of her true document, public, even if accidental, was enough to seed doubt. Every person in that room would remember it. Doubt spreads faster than fear once it's lit. After the breakfast, I found Aaron by the supply closet. He avoided eye contact, adjusting his ID badge over and over. "I didn't mean for that to show up," he said, "but maybe it's good people saw it." "It was perfect," I told him. "Now they know it exists." He exhaled shakily, shoulders loosening. "She's going to suspect something." "She already does," I said. "That's why we move before she does." That afternoon, I filed a preliminary ethics complaint with the County Homeowners Association Oversight Board. I didn't mention Aaron's name, just attached the email chain and noted, "Procedural violations." It was enough to start an audit, maybe even an inquiry into fraudulent governance. As the sun dropped behind the trees, I stood outside the clubhouse, watching residents trickle out of the breakfast. Their conversations were hushed, eyes darting toward Patricia's office windows. The power balance had shifted, just slightly, but permanently. For the first time since this began, I saw Patricia standing alone, clutching her clipboard a little too tight. Her voice was lower, her laughter brittle. Control was slipping, and she knew it. I turned back toward my car, the printed emails tucked in a folder under my arm. Every system of abuse looks invincible until documentation starts to breathe, and mine had just begun to breathe. By Monday morning, Patricia had started her counterattack. Flyers appeared on every mailbox, stamped with the HOA seal. "Beware of misinformation. Certain residents are spreading false claims." My name wasn't printed, but everyone knew who she meant. The subtext was clear: discredit before exposure. Clara found one tucked under our door. She handed it to me without a word, her expression flat but her hands trembling. "She's trying to isolate you," she said quietly. "She's trying to isolate everyone," I replied. "That's how control works." I'd seen this exact pattern in clinical cases, a narcissistic administrator, cornered, turning to smear tactics to reestablish dominance. But her arrogance was her blind spot. She didn't realize her attacks were creating witnesses. Every resident who received one of those flyers now had evidence of defamation. I decided it was time to move outside the neighborhood echo chamber. I drove to the downtown coffee shop that doubled as the hub for local reporters and civic activists. It was the kind of place that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. Dana Myers was sitting by the window, typing furiously. Her investigative column had taken down a corrupt school board 2 years ago, so I knew she understood how small-scale power corrodes communities. When I introduced myself, she raised an eyebrow. "I've been waiting for someone from Lakewood Meadows to reach out," she said. "That HOA's been on my radar for months. Too many anonymous complaints, not enough courage." I handed her the printed email chain, along with Patricia's forged bylaws. "Courage isn't the problem," I said. "It's the collateral damage." She scanned the pages, her journalist's instinct sharpening. "This isn't just unethical. It's criminal misrepresentation. She's impersonating lawful authority." "Exactly," I said. "But if I go after her directly, she'll hide behind procedure. You, however, can make this public before she buries the evidence." Dana smiled faintly. "You're giving me gold, Doctor. But you need to understand, when this goes live, she'll try to burn you down first." I nodded. "That's fine. I'm not the one who should be afraid of the light." While she packed her recorder, I watched the world outside the window. Cars passing, people walking dogs, kids crossing streets. Ordinary life. The kind of life Patricia pretended to protect while suffocating it behind her version of order. That night, Dana called to confirm she was moving forward with a preliminary feature. No names yet, just the broader issue of abusive HOA enforcement tactics. It would air within a week. That would be the spark. But sparks attract eyes. The next morning, I found Aaron waiting by the community fountain, his maintenance cart parked crookedly against the curb. His uniform was rumpled, his cap pulled low. "She knows someone's leaking," he said under his breath. She's checking everyone's emails. Did she question you? I asked. He nodded, looking away. She asked if I've been talking to residents off the clock. I told her no, but she didn't believe me. His eyes flicked upward briefly, scanning the rooftops as if Patricia's gaze might descend from anywhere. She's bluffing, I said. She can't legally monitor personal communication. That doesn't stop her from trying, he muttered. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the cart until his knuckles went white. The posture said what words couldn't. He was terrified, but he wasn't running. You did the right thing, Aaron, I said quietly. You didn't break the rules. You upheld them. You exposed someone who's abusing her title. He exhaled, the breath shaking through his chest. I don't want to lose my job. You won't, I promised. When this goes public, she'll be the one explaining herself to investigators. He nodded, but his body told a different story. Shoulders drawn tight, eyes darting toward the clubhouse where Patricia's SUV sat gleaming like a threat. That afternoon, Patricia called an emergency board meeting. Attendance mandatory, the notice read. That phrase alone confirmed her panic. The meeting was held at the Lakeside Pavilion, a glass-walled conference room overlooking the water. I sat near the back, watching her work the crowd. Her tone was syrupy, every word dipped in false calm. Certain malicious rumors have circulated about my leadership, she began. These fabrications threaten our harmony. When she tried to pivot into another speech about image preservation, I raised my hand. Is it true the bylaws you've been enforcing were never ratified by the membership? She blinked, the first visible crack. That's an outrageous accusation. Then you won't mind showing us the signed vote record, I said. A murmur spread through the room. Patricia froze for half a second before forcing a smile. Records are confidential, Doctor, for board members only. I leaned back. Then perhaps the county oversight office should verify them instead. The silence that followed wasn't just discomfort, it was realization. Residents looked around, whispering. Even her loyalists avoided her gaze. For the first time, I saw Patricia falter, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hand. Power, once unquestioned, was suddenly conditional. When the meeting adjourned, Aaron passed me quietly in the hall. He didn't speak, but his eyes carried something new, resolve replacing fear. I walked outside into the cooling night air, the lake reflecting the clubhouse lights. Patricia's empire was cracking, and soon the whole community would see the fractures. All I needed now was the right moment to let the truth flood through. The lake reflected the clubhouse lights like a warning flare, rippling with every gust of wind. I stood at the edge of the water long after the meeting ended, replaying Patricia's face when I'd mentioned the county oversight office. It wasn't fear, it was calculation, the kind that meant she'd strike back harder, faster, and without hesitation. By morning, she did. A notice was taped to our front door before sunrise, printed in red ink. Urgent violation, hostile conduct toward board authority, pending disciplinary action. Beneath it, in smaller text, was a demand for an immediate appearance before a special compliance review committee. The committee, of course, didn't exist. Patricia had just invented a tribunal. Clara found it first. She's escalating, she said, voice steady, but eyes hollow. It's not about me anymore, is it? I shook my head. No. Now it's about control. You were her example. I'm her threat. The paper fluttered in the wind before I tore it down. The ink bled slightly in my fingers, staining the word hostile across my skin. It almost made me laugh. After years of teaching psychology students about projection, I was living inside the perfect case study. Still, the stakes were climbing. Patricia was tightening her grip on the board, forcing new emergency votes, cornering anyone who questioned her with fines. The emails Dana had scheduled to publish were ready, but she needed one last push, something undeniable, visual, indisputable. That's when Aaron texted me. She's planning another wellness event, Thursday night, gazebo, mandatory attendance. The irony burned. She was returning to the same place she'd humiliated Clara, the same gazebo that still haunted my wife's silence. When I told Clara, she flinched. She wants me there, doesn't she? She wants everyone there, I said. She's trying to prove she still owns this community. Clara looked out the window toward the gazebo's white railing glinting in the sun. Then she should see what she built crumble there too. Her courage startled me, but it also grounded me. Patricia thought intimidation was strength. She'd forgotten that humiliation can turn to defiance. On Thursday, I arrived early. The gazebo was strung with pastel lights and flanked by folding chairs. A banner fluttered overhead. Lakewood Wellness Revival, Restoring Harmony. The words made my stomach turn. Patricia stood by the microphone, clipboard in hand, rehearsing her speech. Aaron hovered near the sound system, pale and tense, fiddling with wires. When she saw me approach, her smile spread too wide. "Ah, Dr. Vale, brave of you to attend, considering your ongoing disciplinary review." "I thought transparency mattered," I said. "Wouldn't want to miss a community performance." Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice sweet. "Tonight is about healing, about showing our residents that disorder has no place in Lakewood Meadows." As the crowd gathered, I scanned faces, neighbors who once avoided eye contact now whispering behind their hands. The rumor of my false accusations was losing traction. Patricia's mask had been visible too long. Aaron caught my eye from behind the mixer, giving a small nod. He'd set up a discreet camera linked to Dana's cloud account. Everything that happened here would be streamed to her newsroom. When Patricia began speaking, her tone dripped with faux compassion. Our neighborhood thrives when we look our best, behave our best, and support our leaders who protect that vision. Then she pivoted, her voice hardening. "But lately, certain individuals have sought to divide us with lies. I stand here tonight to reaffirm that unity means discipline." She motioned toward Clara, who stood near the back, quiet but unflinching. Even those who've struggled with appearance standards have a choice, to comply or to corrupt. I stepped forward before she could continue. "Is that your version of healing, Patricia? Public humiliation as therapy?" Her expression froze. "You are disrupting an official event." "Official?" I interrupted. "The county oversight board confirmed your emergency meetings were never filed. You've been running a private regime under a fake legal charter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Patricia's voice cracked. "That's nonsense." Aaron hit a button on the mixer. Her earlier rehearsal, recorded secretly, played through the speakers. Her own voice echoed, "Make sure everyone attends. I want them to see what happens when one household refuses compliance." The silence that followed was absolute. Every head turned toward her. Patricia lunged for the mic, shouting over the static, "He's manipulating recordings. This is slander." But the panic in her movements betrayed her. Control was slipping in real time, broadcast across the crowd, and unknowingly across the local reporter's feed. I looked toward Aaron, who stood trembling but defiant, his hands gripping the edge of the table. For the first time, he didn't look afraid. Clara stepped beside me, her voice steady. "You called this a revival," she said. "Then let's revive something worth saving." The residents began murmuring. Agreement, disbelief, anger. The air changed, charged with something Patricia couldn't command anymore. Collective awareness. As she stumbled off the gazebo steps, I realized the balance had finally tipped. The community had seen her without the mask. The story had escaped her control, and soon it would escape Lakewood Meadows entirely. By sunrise, the video had already begun spreading. Someone from the crowd must have uploaded it before the night even ended. Patricia's voice, her exact words about forcing compliance, was echoing through group chats and homeowner threads all over the county. The control she'd built on silence had shattered in a single recording, but I knew she wasn't finished. People like Patricia never quit. They recalibrate. And sure enough, an email from the HOA board hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m. Subject line, "Cease and desist, unauthorized recording of private event." It was laughable. The event had been public, advertised as community mandatory. She was trying to rewrite the facts again, but the story had escaped her grasp. Still, I didn't have time to celebrate. Dana called around 7. "The footage is verified. My editor wants a full story by Monday, but we'll need a clear chain of evidence, something showing this wasn't a one-time abuse." That's when I realized who held the missing piece. Aaron Bell. I found him that afternoon near the maintenance shed behind the tennis courts. The air was heavy with the smell of gasoline and wet mulch. He was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the cracked asphalt. The same uniform, same tired look, but there was something different in his posture. Less fear, more weight. "You saw the video," I said. He nodded slowly. Everyone did. She called me this morning, said if I don't correct the narrative, she'll make sure I'm fired for breach of confidentiality. What did you tell her? He looked up at me then, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, but I can't keep lying, not after last night. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small flash drive, holding it like it might burn him. I was going to delete this months ago, but something told me to keep it. I took it carefully. What's on it? He swallowed hard. Audio from the board's private sessions. She didn't know the sound system in the clubhouse auto records meetings for the minutes. I found the files when I was updating the PA system. They're all still dated and time-stamped. You'll hear her tell the board to make examples out of residents who question her. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, the fabric darkening with sweat. She talks about Clara, too. Calls her a liability. Says humiliation builds compliance. I didn't stop her. I just followed orders. The guilt sat heavy between us, thick and unspoken. You were scared, I said, quietly. So was everyone else, but you're not now. He gave a bitter half-smile. Maybe not scared, just tired. You ever feel like you've been holding your breath for years? Every day since the fair, I said. He nodded, staring out toward the water's edge. You're going to use this, right? You're not just going to file another complaint that disappears into some folder? No, I said. We're going to make it public. All of it. Every recording, every threat, every lie. Erin's eyes flicked to mine again. If I give you this, it ruins me here. She'll make sure no one hires me again. She's already ruining people, I said. The difference is, if you act now, you decide what that ruin means. For a long moment, the only sound was the low hum of a lawnmower somewhere across the park. Then Aaron stood, brushing the dust off his pants. Then I want it to mean something. He handed me the flash drive completely this time, fingers steady. One more thing, he said. There's a folder labeled Internal Discipline. She kept photos of people she fined, some of them from hidden cameras. I didn't take them. She ordered it. If the police see that, she's done. Good, I said. You just gave this story teeth. He managed a weak laugh. Guess I finally did something useful. You did something brave, I corrected. That's rarer. As I walked away, the flash drive felt heavier than it should have. Evidence always does. But beneath that weight was something else. Momentum. Patricia's empire had relied on fear, and fear was vanishing one witness at a time. That evening, I sat in my office and transferred the files to Dana's secure server. The audio played softly through my speakers, Patricia's voice cold and self-assured, bragging about disciplinary optics. Each sentence was another nail in her own coffin. When it ended, I sat back and looked out at the darkened street. Porch lights flickered on one by one across Lakewood Meadows. For the first time since this war began, the neighborhood didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt like it was waking up. By the next morning, I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was orchestrating a reckoning. Dana had confirmed receipt of the audio files, and her tone over the phone was razor-sharp. These recordings aren't just HOA misconduct, Ethan, she said. They're psychological abuse, plain and simple. When this airs, it'll detonate. But exposure isn't only about truth, it's about timing. Patricia was unraveling, but I needed her to collapse publicly, in front of her followers, not in private silence. A quiet fall could be rewritten, a public one becomes permanent. So I drove to the courthouse district that afternoon to meet Dana in person and finalize our plan. The courthouse steps were buzzing with reporters and city employees. Dana stood near the fountain, hair tied back, eyes bright, with determination. You ready to light the fuse? She asked, handing me a copy of her upcoming expose draft. The headline read, HOA President Accused of Coercion, Unlawful Enforcement, and Emotional Abuse. I scanned the text. Every quote, every timestamp, every phrase from the recordings was there. My wife's humiliation had become the centerpiece, not as spectacle but as proof of what happens when unchecked authority meets a cowardly community. We'll run this Monday morning, Dana said, but the broadcast will need an on-camera statement, someone credible, ideally you or the whistleblower. Aaron won't go public, I said. He's already risked enough. Then it's you, she said. You're the face of this story now. I hesitated, watching the courthouse flags whip in the wind. If Patricia goes down, she'll drag the HOA with her. The residents need something to hold on to after the fallout. Dana smiled. Then give them you. Someone who stood up instead of bowed down. Back in Lakewood Meadows, the atmosphere had shifted. The same neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now watched from their porches with cautious sympathy. Patricia's SUV wasn't parked at her usual spot near the entrance anymore. Word was spreading that the county had launched a preliminary audit. That evening, I walked the neighborhood, clipboard in hand. It wasn't symbolic. I was gathering testimonies. Mrs. Feldman from Lot 23 told me about her $600 fine for having asymmetrical holiday lights. A retired veteran admitted Patricia forced him to repaint his porch twice in 1 month. I recorded every account. One story was powerful, but many became undeniable. At sunset, I met Aaron near the maintenance lot. The sky was washed in orange and violet, the kind of beauty that used to make Lakewood Meadows feel like paradise before Patricia turned it into a dictatorship. "She's losing it," Aaron said quietly. "She sent out a memo this morning. Says all residents must sign new compliance acknowledgments or risk suspension of privileges." I raised an eyebrow. "Privileges? We're homeowners, not tenants." "She doesn't care," he said. "But here's what matters. She's calling a final emergency meeting tomorrow night. She wants to restore confidence." A smile crept across my face. "Then tomorrow night becomes our stage." Aaron frowned. "You're going to be there?" "Front row," I said, "and Dana's team will be watching live." He nodded, but I could see the turmoil behind his calm. His hands fiddled with his ID lanyard, spinning it around his fingers, muscles tense. "I never wanted this to blow up like this," he said. "I just wanted her to stop." "She won't stop unless she's stopped publicly," I replied. "You helped make that possible." He gave a small, exhausted laugh. "So this is justice, huh? Doesn't feel clean." "Justice rarely does," I said, "but it's necessary." When I got home, Clara was sitting on the porch steps, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at me with quiet strength. "You're taking this all the way, aren't you?" "I have to," I said. "For you. For everyone," she broke. She reached out and touched my hand. "Then whatever happens tomorrow, remember, this started with her trying to take my dignity. Don't let her take yours." That night, I reviewed Dana's final edits, adjusting my statement for the broadcast. I didn't write it like a speech. I wrote it like a eulogy, for every neighbor's silence, for every small act of compliance that gave her power. By midnight, I sent Dana my video statement. This isn't about property lines or lawn codes. It's about what happens when ordinary people surrender accountability to bullies. Lakewood Meadows forgot that order without compassion is just control, and control without limits is tyranny. As the upload bar reached 100%, I looked out at the darkened gazebo. Tomorrow, it would be filled again. One last performance for Patricia. Only this time, the audience wouldn't be hers. It would be everyone watching. By Friday morning, the neighborhood felt different. Doors that once stayed closed were open, voices that used to whisper now carried across driveways. The fear was thinning, replaced by something sharper, anticipation. Patricia's final emergency meeting was scheduled for that night, and everyone knew it wouldn't go the way she planned. I woke early, reviewing my notes and rewatching the video statement I'd sent to Dana. The broadcast was cued, waiting for my signal. Once the meeting began, once Patricia showed her true face again, the story would air live across the county's evening segment. The exposure had to be synchronized, or she'd claim editing or manipulation. Timing would make truth undeniable. Clara joined me at the kitchen table, a mug in her hands. "She's going to come for you tonight," she said. "You know that." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "The louder she gets, the clearer she becomes." Clara reached over, resting her hand on mine. "I just want this to end." "It will," I said softly. "Tonight." By noon, I drove to meet Aaron one last time before the storm. We met behind the community clubhouse, where the storage sheds lined the edge of the lake. He looked worn down but resolute, a man who'd finally decided to stop running from his own truth. "She's been calling the board all morning," he said. "Half of them aren't answering anymore. The other half are pretending they didn't know about the fake bylaws." "That's good," I said. "Fear's moving in the right direction this time." Aaron handed me a folder, printed copies of the disciplinary emails, photos, and notes he'd pulled from the clubhouse computer. This is everything. If she tries to delete the server tonight, you've got backups. I took the folder and nodded. You realize you're the backbone of this case now. He gave a nervous smile. Feels strange. I used to fix sprinklers. Now I'm exposing tyranny. You're fixing something bigger, I said, the rot under the grass. As the sun lowered, I walked through the park toward the pavilion where the meeting would be held. The air was heavy with humidity, thunderheads gathering at the horizon. It felt poetic, nature itself preparing for the reckoning. When I arrived, Patricia was already there, arranging chairs in perfect symmetrical rows. Her clipboard rested against her hip, and her eyes flicked toward me like daggers. Still playing hero? She asked, not looking up from her papers. No, I said, just documenting. Her smirk faltered for half a second before she turned back to her list. You think one news story will erase the years I've put into maintaining this community? You'll be a headline today? A footnote tomorrow? Maybe, I said, but the footage lasts forever. Her hands stilled. What footage? I let the silence linger before replying. You'll see soon enough. The meeting began at 7 sharp. Every seat was filled. More people than I'd ever seen at any HOA function. Some brought their phones out, pretending to take notes but clearly recording. Patricia climbed the gazebo steps like a politician walking into a deposition. She started with her usual script. Residents of Lakewood Meadows, it's time to address recent misrepresentations. Certain individuals have spread malicious rumors regarding our board's actions. Your board? I interrupted, standing near the back. You mean the one that no longer has quorum since 3 members resigned this morning? Gasps echoed through the crowd. Patricia's eyes widened. That's a lie. Check your emails, I said. They resigned after receiving copies of your internal recordings. Her voice cracked. Those files were stolen. They were evidence, I said, and now they're public. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Dana, broadcast live. A murmur spread through the crowd as notifications lit up screens. Patricia's voice, recorded in her own words, began playing through dozens of phones simultaneously. Make examples out of them. Humiliation keeps them compliant. Her face drained of color. Turn that off. That's edited. This is defamation. But no one moved. Every neighbor she'd ever intimidated was now holding her to account in perfect, digital symmetry. Aaron stepped forward from the side of the crowd, his maintenance shirt damp with sweat but his chin raised. You told us we were protecting the neighborhood, he said, his voice trembling but clear. We were protecting you. That ends tonight. Patricia froze, staring at him as if betrayal was unthinkable. You ungrateful. He cut her off. No, ma'am. You're the one who forgot gratitude. The storm finally broke overhead, thunder rumbling through the gazebo. Rain splattered the wood, cold and sudden. No one left. The sound of rainfall only made her shouting smaller. I stepped forward, my phone still recording. Patricia Lenz, chairwoman of the Lakewood Meadows HOA, I said, my voice rising above the rain. You're officially under investigation by the county for fraudulent governance, coercion, and harassment. She dropped the clipboard. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she turned and walked down the steps, water running down her face like defeat. Behind me, the neighbors began to clap. Not loud, not triumphant, just steady. It wasn't celebration, it was release. The rain didn't stop until midnight. When it finally eased, the entire neighborhood was different. The lights in Patricia's house stayed off, her porch empty for the first time in years. The air smelled like wet cedar and freedom, strange and heavy, as if the storm had rinsed away something more than dirt. I didn't sleep that night. Every few hours I checked my phone. The broadcast was everywhere now. Dana's report had gone live on all major local channels, replaying Patricia's voice on loop. Humiliation builds compliance. Her face filled every thumbnail, every community blog, every HOA reform page. The story had gone viral before dawn. By sunrise, the county website confirmed it. Lakewood Meadows HOA, under emergency review. A banner replaced their usual mission statement, announcing suspension of operations pending legal inquiry. Patricia's empire was frozen, but public exposure is a double-edged sword. For every comment calling her a tyrant, there were others claiming it was exaggerated, sensationalized. I knew the only way to end it cleanly was to make the truth undeniable, to let the system itself crush her facade. That morning, Dana called. "You've lit a fire," she said, "but the county's sending inspectors this afternoon. If you can meet them, walk them through the violations. It'll lock this story for good." "I'll be there," I said. When I hung up, Clara stood by the window, arms folded. Her hair had grown in more since the spring. Still short, but full and soft, like defiance taking root. "She's not done, you know," she said quietly. "People like her always find one last move." I nodded. "Then we'll meet her at the finish line." By noon, 3 county officials arrived in sedans marked with the Department of Community Oversight seal. Their clipboards looked almost comical after the weeks of Patricia's threats. Finally, paperwork that mattered. They met me at the community square, right by the scratched Harmony sign, where residents had gathered in uneasy silence. "Dr. Vale," one inspector said, shaking my hand, "we've reviewed the submitted evidence. We'll need access to the clubhouse systems for verification." Aaron appeared then, carrying a ring of keys. "You'll have it," he said firmly. "She can't stop us anymore." We walked together into the clubhouse, its lemon cleaner scent now sickly and stale. Patricia wasn't there. Her office door was locked, but the inspectors had authority to open it. Inside, the walls were lined with binders labeled compliance logs and appearance audits. I could feel my stomach turn just seeing them. Aaron powered up her desktop computer, his fingers trembling slightly. "She used to make me back up her files every week," he said. "I know where everything's buried." The inspectors watched as he navigated through folders, emails, reports, even photos of residents' homes labeled visual infractions, each one time-stamped, each one signed off by Patricia herself. The evidence spoke louder than any broadcast ever could. One of the inspectors scribbled something onto his pad. She was enforcing unauthorized regulations. This exceeds HOA jurisdiction. We'll be recommending full receivership. Aaron looked over at me, jaw tight. "So that's it? She's gone?" "Not yet," I said, "but the system she built just turned on her." Outside, residents were gathering again, whispers spreading faster than wind. Word had gotten out that investigators were inside. The crowd grew, cautious but hopeful. I stepped out to address them, rainwater still dripping from the gazebo roof above. "It's official," I said, voice steady. "The county's taking control of the HOA. All fines and disciplinary actions are suspended pending review." A ripple of applause swept through the square. Some cried, others just exhaled for the first time in months. Then a car door slammed across the street. Patricia stood by her SUV, drenched in disbelief. Her usual precision was gone, hair undone, eyes red, clipboard nowhere in sight. She walked toward us, shouting, "You think this ends me?" she yelled. "You think some TV story can erase my authority? This neighborhood needs order." The inspector stepped forward, calm and professional. "Ms. Lenz, please return to your residence. You're under formal notice. Continued interference could be considered obstruction." She froze mid-step. For the first time, she looked small. The crowd didn't cheer. They just watched her, quiet, resolute. Patricia turned slowly, got back into her car, and drove away down the main road without looking back. Aaron joined me on the steps, shoulders slumped. "You think she'll fight it?" "She'll try," I said. "But it won't matter. The story's bigger than her now." Clara stepped forward, slipping her hand into mine. "So what happens next?" I looked at the community around us, neighbors talking again, laughter breaking through tension. "Next," I said, "we rebuild what she destroyed, without fear, without her." The following week, the county announced that Lakewood Meadows would hold a mandatory public hearing, open attendance, open mic, full transparency. It was the final step before the HOA board could be officially dissolved. Every resident was invited to speak. Patricia would have her chance to defend herself, and I'd have mine to end this once and for all. The hearing took place in the town's civic auditorium, a broad, wood-paneled room that usually hosted graduations and holiday banquets. That night, every seat was filled. News cameras lined the aisles, microphones pointed toward the long table at the front where the county officers sat. The air buzzed with whispers and restless energy. Clara sat beside me in the second row, her hand folded around mine. She looked calm, her strength quiet but absolute. Aaron stood near the back, in his clean maintenance uniform, head high for once. When the doors closed, the room dimmed except for the stage lights. Then Patricia entered. She looked nothing like the woman who once ruled our neighborhood. Her posture was stiff, her expression rehearsed, but her confidence was fractured. She wore a navy blazer that couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as she took her seat at the table marked Respondent, Lakewood Meadows, HOA. The county moderator, a tall man with a steady voice, began. This hearing concerns allegations of fraudulent governance, harassment, and misconduct under HOA management statutes. Each party will have time to present evidence and testimony. Dr. Ethan Vale, as the initiating complainant, you'll begin. I rose, the murmur of the audience dimming to silence. I'd spent nights rehearsing, not a speech, but a truth that needed to live outside my chest. My name is Dr. Ethan Vale, I said, stepping toward the microphone. I'm not here because I dislike my HOA. I'm here because leadership turned into dictatorship. I'm here because my wife, recovering from cancer, was humiliated under the pretense of community standards. A wave of uneasy murmurs spread across the rows. Cameras clicked. Patricia's jaw clenched. I continued, my voice steady. This wasn't about grass height or fence color. It was about control. We were fined, mocked, and threatened under bylaws that never legally existed. The board forged documents, staged meetings, and silenced dissent. The moderator nodded toward the projection screen. You may present your exhibits. Aaron stepped forward, connecting a flash drive to the system. The projector flickered, then displayed the evidence. Patricia's emails, her memos, her recorded words. Make examples out of them. Humiliation keeps them compliant. Gasps filled the auditorium. Some residents covered their mouths, others shook their heads in disbelief. The footage from the gazebo appeared next, showing Patricia's cruel smile as she called the wellness event to order. Clara turned her face away, tears threatening, but she didn't break. When the final clip ended, silence lingered. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights, the slow shuffle of disbelief turning into outrage. The moderator gestured. Ms. Lenz, you may respond. Patricia stood, clutching the edge of the table. You're being manipulated, she said, her voice cracking but loud. This is a smear campaign. Everything I did was to protect property values and maintain order. These recordings, taken without consent, are edited. The moderator interjected calmly. Ms. Lenz, the county's digital forensics team verified authenticity. These are your statements. She froze, blinking rapidly like she hadn't heard him. Then she tried again, more desperate. You people don't understand what happens when you let things slide. Without discipline, communities collapse. A voice rose from the audience. Mrs. Feldman from Lot 23. You fined me for hanging my husband's memorial flag. Another shouted. You made me repaint my porch twice in 1 week. The room ignited, voices overlapping, outrage erupting. Patricia tried to shout over them, but the noise swallowed her whole. The moderator struck his gavel once, restoring order. Enough, we've heard both sides. Then he turned toward me. Dr. Vale, one final statement before deliberation. I stepped forward again, the light hot on my face. This isn't just about one woman abusing power, I said. It's about what happens when good people let fear make them small. Patricia didn't build this system alone. We helped her by staying quiet. But silence ends tonight. This community deserves transparency, not tyranny. The applause began slow, hesitant, then spread, building into something fierce and unified. It wasn't about me. It was about everyone reclaiming their voice. Patricia sank back into her chair, her face pale under the lights. The moderator announced a brief recess, but the decision was already written across every resident's face. As I stepped away from the mic, Aaron caught my eye from the back of the room. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that says, "It's done." Clara stood, wrapping her arm through mine. The crowd parted for us as we walked toward the exit. Behind us, the sound of people talking wasn't anxious anymore. It was alive. The vote came 3 days later. The County Oversight Board released its findings in a packed press conference outside the Lakewood Meadows entrance. where the old brass sign still carried that scar through the word harmony. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded the podium, and the residents gathered shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the verdict that would decide who owned their community now. The lead investigator, a man named Ron Patel, stepped up to the mic. After reviewing all evidence, he began, including forged bylaws, unauthorized surveillance, and confirmed instances of public humiliation under the guise of community enforcement, the Lakewood Meadows Homeowners Association is hereby placed under state receivership, effective immediately. All prior fines and disciplinary actions are void. The crowd erupted. Cheers, tears, disbelief, relief so raw it shook the air. I stood among them, my arm around Clara as neighbors I barely knew reached out to shake my hand. Patricia wasn't there. Her attorney had withdrawn that morning, and her resignation letter was already public record. The county had stripped her of authority, pending criminal review. Aaron arrived late, still in his maintenance uniform, a quiet smile ghosting his face. He didn't need to say a word. The guilt that had once bent his shoulders was gone. He'd done what he came to do, told the truth, no matter the cost. The following week, the community gathered again, but this time it wasn't for judgment or spectacle. It was for rebuilding. The residents voted to dissolve the HOA entirely, replacing it with a volunteer-led neighborhood trust. For the first time, people spoke freely. No fear, no fines, no clipboards. I stood at the edge of the crowd as they took down the old sign and raised a new one. It read simply, Lakewood Gardens, a community of neighbors. No bylaws beneath it, no slogans about decorum. Just people, tired but unbroken. That night, I walked to the gazebo, the place where everything had started, the place that had nearly broken my wife. The wood still bore faint scratches from the night Patricia held her wellness ceremony. The lights were new now, warm and soft, reflecting off the lake. Clara was already there, tending to a planter she'd brought from home. Lavender and marigolds, colors she said felt like healing. She looked up as I approached. "Feels different here," she said. "It should," I replied. "It finally belongs to the people who live here." She smiled faintly, brushing soil from her palms. "Do you think it'll last?" I looked out over the quiet lake, where the lights from the houses shimmered like small, defiant stars. "Maybe not forever," I said, "but long enough for people to remember that fear only works when no one speaks up." Behind us, footsteps approached. It was Aaron, holding a sealed envelope. "The county asked me to deliver this," he said. "They're recommending restitution for residents affected by her fines. You should know. You're first on the list." I shook my head. "We didn't do this for money." He smiled. "I know, but maybe it's symbolic, making her pay for what she took." Clara stepped forward, resting her hand on his arm. "You kept your word," she said. "You helped end something cruel." Aaron looked at her, eyes glistening. "I just fixed what I helped break." As he walked away, I realized how complete this ending felt. Not neat, not perfect, but honest. Every broken thing had left its mark, but those marks were part of the healing now. Later that evening, Dana's final segment aired on local television. From control to courage, how one neighborhood fought back. Her closing narration echoed softly through our living room. In Lakewood Meadows, power once meant silence. But one act of defiance reminded an entire community that rules mean nothing without humanity. I turned off the TV and stepped outside. The night was calm, cicadas humming. Across the street, families talked on porches again. Laughter drifted where fear used to live. Clara leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just exhales. When I glanced back at the gazebo one last time, I noticed someone had placed a small wooden plaque at its base. It read, "For everyone who refused to be silent." I smiled. "Looks like she won't be forgotten. Neither will you," Clara said. Maybe that was enough. The legacy of one ordinary family who refused to kneel to corruption. Not heroes, not rebels, just homeowners who remembered that decency isn't optional. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.